Protagonistas. No comment.
Buenas noches, gente, ¿cómo andan? Bienvenidos a este nuevo programa de Protagonistas de cómic, temporada 2023, esta temporada que vamos a empezar con el señor Mario, que acá va a estar. ¿Cómo te va, Marito?
¿Cómo andas, Kyle? ¿Todo bien?
Bien.
Bien, las corridas estuve cocinando todo, así que rápido para estar ya presto aquí en Protagonistas del cómic, que la verdad la vamos a romper en este 2023.
Yo la verdad que contentísimo empezar este 2023 con 37, con 36 ya en los años anteriores protagonistas del cómic, y este 2023 no podíamos empezar con algo tranca, así que dije bueno, empecemos con todo, con lo mejor, así que vamos a empezar a hablar en inglés ahora para presentar a nuestro invitado del día de hoy, the one and only Mr. Rack Morales.
Welcome,
Hi.
sir. Sorry, my light
Rack?
just. I'm good. I'm sorry. My ring light just died on me. So, unfortunately,
It's okay,
Problem, sir.
We'll do our best.
How you doing, sir? Brad? Are you good?
Bueno, thank you. I'm doing very nicely. Thank you. Busy, very busy.
I imagine. To begin with the interview, tell us about your beginnings as a comic book reader first, and then as a comic book professional.
Okay. Well, as we were discussing earlier, I'm originally from New York City. I was born in Manhattan, and let's tell this story again. So when I was four or 5 years old, my family moved to New Jersey, and that's why I don't speak Spanish, because I lost it. And across the street, while I was helping my father take out things out of the car to put into the house, there was a group of kids across the street, and they were going, I don't know, Puerto Rican this and Puerto Rican that, right? And I'm 5 now, mind you, I'm 5 years old. So please remind yourself, 5 years old. And I got offended because I knew they were being disrespectful. So I grabbed a towel from the back of my father's Pontiac, and I wrapped it around my neck. And I ran up to them. I said, "That's super Puerto Rican." So I was called Super Puerto Rican for many, many years. I don't remember my first comic, but I do remember being very young and loving the artwork, and you know, I just kind of took it from there. I've been drawing since I was 3, and so, you know, it was comic books that got me into illustrating. And growing up, I was a Boy Scout, and we used to get Boys Life magazine, and Norman Rockwell did those covers. So between Norman Rockwell and comic books is where I found a little, you know, warm spot for me. And I imitated everybody, and I drew everything. And I was encouraged by my art teachers, and my parents were very, very supportive. And so that's about it. And comic books was always my first love. As I got older, I started getting into other things, other illustrators. Keith Giffen has a great saying. He says, "We lose our audience when they lose their virginity." And
I'm not agree with Mr. Giffen.
and for me, I started paying attention more to illustrators after that. But when it came to finding a living in artwork, there weren't many options, and I went back to comic books. And I lived only 15 minutes away from the Joe Kubert School. So when I was in junior high school, I was taking Saturday morning sketch classes. And after I graduated high school, I went there for my education and learned the trade. So that's how I got in. 1989, I broke in.
Sir, and what were your teachers on the Kubert School? Who are your teachers, sir?
Well, Argentina, we have Jose Delbo. He was, when I was a kid, he used to do work for Charlton Comics.
Yeah.
And he did Billy the Kid. And I learned how to draw a 6-shooter by imitating him and horses. So I was very excited to find out he was one of my instructors. Ben Ruiz was another instructor of note. He went to School of Visual Arts in New York City, and he was taught by Bern Hogarth, predominantly known for his work on Tarzan. And he followed, in fact, Hal Foster. Hal Foster went from Tarzan, and he went from Tarzan to Prince Valiant. And so when he went to Prince Valiant, they used Bern Hogarth was the artist for that. So he was taught by Bern Hogarth, and Ben Ruiz taught me. And I had Adam Kubert was one of my instructors. In fact, we were his first class, his first time teaching. He was very nervous, but he was one of my instructors. Milt Neal, he taught animation. He's predominantly known for doing work with Disney, the old school stuff. He did Dumbo and Fantasia and all that. So he was one of my instructors. One of my favorites was Art Reeson, and he's graphics, how to do mechanical stuff and production work. Let's see. Joe, occasionally. I only went it's a 3-year school, and I left after the second year, and he only taught the third-year students, but occasionally he would substitute. So we would get him as a substitute teacher, and a bunch of other people too.
Rex, you said that you have an Argentinian instructor. Did you read any comic book from Argentina?
No, I didn't. We didn't get a whole lot of that in America, especially when I was younger. Comic book shops didn't become a thing until I was already a professional. So I would have to take my my bike and pedal down to a 7-Eleven to get a comic book, and they were a quarter back then, 25 cents.
Yeah.
So we only got the American publishers. As I got older, I started getting into a lot of the Filipino artists, like Alex Nino and Nestor Verdando, Rudy Libres, and then some Spaniards like Victor de la Fuente. I loved his work a lot. But nobody specifically that I could recall from Argentina. I probably came across a few, not realizing it was Argentinian, but I couldn't specifically say anybody. Sorry, Jose Delbo.
No, because we have we had an interesting industry here in our country. Guys like Hugo Pratt. He was Italian, but Brescia, Jose Garcia Lopez. So then he moved to Spain.
I didn't know he's Argentinian.
Solano Lopez, Jose Solano Lopez.
They did more recently. Olivetti, Eduardo Rizzo.
Okay, I didn't know Jose was from Argentina. That's interesting. He never told me. He always yells at me, "How come you don't speak Spanish?" I says, "Well."
So here in Argentina, our industry is more like the drawings and all the art is like a more European.
Oh, I see.
So that's kind of like of our work right now.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
Rex, and tell us about your first work. How you landed your first work?
You want that story? Okay. All right. Here's another story. After I left the Joe Cuba school, I my first job was a newspaper route. I became a paper boy. I had a motor route because I had a car, and I was living at my mother's house. Like I said, the school was only 15 minutes away from where I grew up, so I didn't have to go to the dorms. I would just drive home. And back in 1988, 87, we didn't have computers. We didn't have cell phones. We had the newspaper. So for me, getting a newspaper out meant having a daily want ads. So I would look to see what art jobs were available. And eventually, my first art job was working for a silk screener. We made T-shirts and joggers and things like that. And I was the art department. I would do the artwork and do the color separation mechanicals and send it off to the back where they would make the T-shirts. And one time while I was working, I heard my boss yelling. And he yelled a lot. He was a yeller. Usually he was yelling at his wife because it was a mom and pop operation. And, you hear him yell like, handle it, Enid, and she would do whatever. But this time he's screaming at the top of his lungs. And I was at the end of a hallway and he was the next door on the left. And I'm wondering, I've never heard Mel sound so loud. What's going on? So I open up the door and there's a crowd of people in front of his door and it's closed. And he's yelling at his lawyer. And I'm looking at the crowd of people, and in the crowd is a camera from like a news camera from channel 2, So I close the door, I check my hair, and I decide to walk into the back to find out what's going on because I had a friend who worked in production who did all the silk screening. And I wanted to ask him what's going on. And as I turn the corner to go into the back, there's a bunch of cops in the front of the store, and they're going through all this paperwork and everything's flying all over the place. And there's plainclothes policemen, detectives. They had regular cops in regular uniforms. And I was like, whoa. So I go in the back and I go to my friend Sean and I say, Sean, what's going on? And he says, well, you remember so-and-so who Mel fired? I said, yeah. He said, well, he blew the whistle on Mel. I said, oh, well, this might be the last day at work. So I go back to my studio, to where my studio was. As I'm walking, I get a tap on my shoulder, and I turn around, and this is like this big detective. Now, when I worked at the shop, Mel would kind of borrow things from other companies. Companies like Nike. Okay. And I would do the artwork knowing full well that it's not copyrighted material that we're using. Because at the bottom it didn't say copyright 1988,
Yeah.
So, Nike, Benetton, Esprit, Banana Republic, all that. So I get this tap on the shoulder and the cop says to me, he says, you work here? And I said, yeah. And he says, do you know where the films are? I go, yeah. Show them to me. I said, okay. So I go into the art director's office. Now, the art director was my roommate. She was getting her teeth done that day. So she wasn't in her office. And she had slats on the side, files, very thin files. And I kneel down and I'm pulling out Benetton, Esprit, Disney, Mets, Yankees, everybody. And as I'm pulling this out, I get a blast of light to my left. And I turned to the left, and there's a Channel 2 news camera right on me.
Oh.
And you ever had that nervous laughter? You know?
Yeah.
So I'm pulling out Nike. You know, and so I hand him the files, the acetate, and that was it. And after all the commotion's done, at the end of the day, I told Mel, I says, Mel, I think I was 22 at the time. I says, I'm too young to have, this on my record, knowing full well it wouldn't be, because I'm an innocent, but I didn't want to be a part of something. And if I went back to it, that would mean I would knowingly go back to doing something I knew was wrong. So I says, I'm sorry, Mel, this is going to be my last day. And that was it. And then my roommate found out what happened, and she knew that I quit because of it. And so she decided to quit. And about a week later, I wake up and the house is empty and left me with the lease. Oh. So she left. And I was like, okay, what do I do now? So I get on the phone and I called Mike Chen, who's, excuse me. Sorry, getting a little dry.
It's okay.
Who was the administrator at the Joe Cuba School. And I said, Mike, I need to find some work. Do you have some editors that you can give me the phone number of? And he gave me 5 editors' phone numbers. And it was Andy Helfer. It was Mike Carlin, Karen Berger, somebody who I can't remember, and the last one was Barbara Kaelberg. And as soon as I called the first editor. As soon as I got a commitment and a time and a day, I called the next editor. It says, okay, I'm going to be in New York on this day. Could I see you? So I had 5 interviews that day. And I brought my portfolio with me. And I had my A portfolio and my B portfolio. My A I felt was my best representation. And B was stuff that was pretty good, but, in case they wanted to see more. And Andy Helfer, I walked into his office and I says, hi, I'm here for the interview. And he looked at me like he forgot he had an interview. I says, all right, Andy, thank you very much. I'll go see somebody else.
Oh my God.
I saw Karen Berger. She was unimpressed. She was doing Vertigo at the time, and that was high-end illustration. And I was angling my work toward comic books, more of the regular superhero stuff. And so she was not interested. Mike Carlin. Joey Cavalieri. That was the other one. And Mike Carlin looked at it, and he gave me some suggestions, and but he said basically he thought I was a year away. And Joey was very nice, and he basically deferred to Mike. Whatever Mike said is what Joey said. And so my last interview was Barbara Kaelberg, and she was on the way out as I was coming in. And she said, come back in 2 weeks. I said, all right. So it was at this time where I had really no money coming in. After I did the silk screening thing, I worked a little bit at a Subway sandwich shop just to make a couple bucks.
Yeah.
But nothing substantial. And I was not going to make my rent. And I was running out of food. So I called family. And my father and my uncle, he paid for our rent. My rent, and my sister and my mother came with a care package of groceries, so that floated me for another month. And so I worked hard at working up my portfolio. And 2 weeks later, I came in. I saw Barbara Kaelberg, And I showed her my work, and she says, I might have something for you. We're working with TSR, and I need an artist for a comic called Forgotten Realms. And if you could do these character sheets, we'll give you consideration. I said, sure. When do you need it? She went, which means tomorrow.
Yeah.
So the next day, and I worked hard that night. There was 5 characters. I did them up. I walked in the next day and I handed them to her, and she says, wow, this is better than I thought it would be. I says, all right, here's the first script, and I'll give you a work for hire contract. And, get it in. I said, all right, when do you need it by? She went, I said, all right. Now, normally I knew that the industry standard was 5 pages a week. And for the first 4 issues of my career, I did 8 pages a week.
Oh.
So you could see a shift in quality from issue 4 to issue 5. Because by then I got a continuity contract and I was in. And that's how I broke into the industry.
Oh. It was a very hard work for you in this, from the beginnings, but it was tough for you, right? It's tough.
Well, that's when you go to Cuban school, it's a boot camp. So
yeah,
you would go home after school and have 8 hours of homework a night. Joe would tell us it's probably not a good idea to have a part-time job because you're gonna have a lot of work. So it's all day drawing, all night drawing, and I can't tell you how many times I woke up driving to school the next day behind the wheel and waking up like this with cars coming at me. So that happened to me a couple of times, and it was not uncommon to see people falling asleep in class because it was an awful lot of work. So I was used to it, so if they need 5 sketches the next day of characters, it's easy. I could do that. If you need 8 pages a week, I could do that. It's not going to be great, but the most important ability is reliability, and you have to be very proficient. So you have to prove, when you're nobody, you have to prove that at least if you're going to be somebody, you're going to be somebody reliable.
Yeah.
And that's that was the most important thing. And I knew it. I had a plan. I wasn't going in not realizing. I knew I was going to slow down, but I knew I needed security first. And so that's what I did. And then I get to 5 pages a week, which is, again, industry standard. But now I've got a contract. And I'm walking in the hallway of DC. Back when it was 666 Fifth Avenue was the building. And that building is now known more famously for being the building that Jared Kushner bought before he married Ivanka Trump. His father said you have to buy a newspaper, you have to get a building, and you have to marry somebody rich. And that's what he did. And 666 Fifth Avenue was the building he bought. And DC moved over to 1325 Avenue of the Americas after that, and then Broadway later. But so I'm walking in the hallways, and Bob Greenberg sees me coming down, and he's looked at me and says, "You're slowing down." I says, "Bob, I'm doing 5 pages a week." He says, "Yeah, but you're doing 8." I says, "Well, yeah, but I'm doing better work now." She looked at me and goes, "Uh-huh," and he walked away. That's okay.
No pressure.
No.
Easy, no pressure.
Used to it.
So this is the comic that you work on.
Mm-hmm.
Forgotten Realms.
Look at that incredible artwork. I like the design of that. The original cover had a white background, but they decided to make it black, and I really like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Look at that fantastic crap. Lovely.
But it's what for me it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's
for us,
detailed.
it's amazing.
It's pretty good. It's very good.
Look at that ship. It's amazing.
It's okay when you got deadlines.
Rax, when here in the show, all the artists, when they saw their first jobs, they say, "Oh, this is so bad," and for us, it's just a work of art. It's a piece of art. So
we appreciate that, but art is evolution.
Yeah, of course.
And that's what motivates you. There are some artists that are very good at keeping a certain look and being very reliable, and they keep the industry afloat without question. But there are people who are very aesthetic oriented and want it to be the best they can do. And those are the people that push the industry forward. Yeah. So you have to have a balance of both.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I tried to. I tried to do a little bit of both, but I was always trying to be a better artist as I went along.
And after Forgotten Realms, you work on Black Condor. That was co-created by you.
Yes, it was. And then they killed the character.
They killed the character.
Yeah. In Black is Night, I got a phone call from Jeff Johns that says, "I'm very sorry." I go, "What's going on?" He goes, "I had to kill Black Condor." And I said, "Oh, that's okay." They weren't doing anything with him anyway, so But yeah, I designed a costume and that logo, the Black Condor logo. I designed that as well. That's my artwork as well.
But he did his part on Zero Hour after 0 Hour, if I remember.
I guess
he was with Hawkman.
With the Tanagarian.
Yeah, well, he and I did Hawkman. We did 21 issues, which was at the time we were very much wanted to make sure that we had the longest run on Hawkman. And prior to that, I believe Kubert had 15 issues, so we wanted to do better than that, and we did. So that we were proud of that. In fact, in the 2 years that we were working on Hawkman, we were the only title that didn't have a creative art change. We stayed with the same people, the same writer and artist for the 2 years. So we're proud of that as well.
It was fun. It was comfortable for all of you working with the same team and creating all the stories and everything like that, right?
Oh yeah. And Peter Tomasi deserves credit as well because he was the editor, and he made sure everything was running smoothly. It's not easy to do because Jeff Johns lived in California and I lived in Pennsylvania, so the time zone difference was a problem. So he made sure that I got my scripts on time, that there was no lag time. And at the time, I was under exclusive contract, so they had no choice but to feed me. I couldn't work for anybody else, so they made sure that I got the work in. And
then you have the chance to do it with to draw a lot of another characters from the DC universe. So I think that you loved that, right?
That was
Adam.
Yeah, that was very important to me. Prior to that, before I did Hawkman, I did Hourman, and thank you, Parallel. I did Hourman for 20 issues, and that was Tom Pyre was my writer, and after the industry imploded back in the early 90s, because I went from DC, I went to Valiant, and I did work on Turok and Geomancer and a bunch of other things over there. Mm-hmm. Then the industry imploded, and none of us were getting work. Comic book shops were closing, and so when I came back to DC, I was very energetic, very ambitious. In that 2 year span, while we were figuring things out, I got divorced. I had a foreclosure, and I went bankrupt, all in the same 2 year span. So I was very energized to do something when I got back, and they gave me Hour Man, and I pestered them, because I really wanted the job. And when I got it, I told Tom, I says, I don't know what you're going to do with the title, but please, please, please make sure that we do a lot of other heroes. Of course, he had it in mind all along. But Hour Man was a new version of Hour Man, and it didn't have a template or didn't have a long run behind it. Not like Batman, Superman, or Wonder Woman. I was basically starting from fresh. And
so it was your job to redesign all Hour Man, right?
Yeah. All those Hour Men were all my design. Thank you. And so so I was very, because when I was doing Forgotten Realms, that sword and sorcery stuff, and editors don't know anything about artwork. They know about writing, they know about continuity, and they understand the industry, and they know how to do their job well. But almost, I can't. Maybe one editor, Dan Raspler, is the other one who had an opinion about art, and I listened to it. Beyond that, they don't know. They don't know it until you show it to them. And in fact, I was trying to find work after TSR and DC decided to part their ways, and so I was shopping my work around at the offices again. And Brian Augustin, who turned out to be my writer on Black Condor, said to me, well, yeah, sword and sorcery stuff is fine, but can you draw a car? And I looked at him funny. I says, yeah, it's a box with wheels, which is, kind of a flippant way to say it. But basically I was telling him that, yeah, what you do is that you take a shape and you build on top of the shape, and then you finish it. That's how you draw. That's basic drawing. So if you take a rectangle and you put another rectangle on top, and then you put circles on the side, you have a car, So I was a little offended by that. And then I realized editors don't know how to judge potential, And so, ironically, he became my next partner. It was Kim Yale, who used to be married to John Ostrander, but she passed away, rest her soul, was the editor first, and she gave me work. And then Elliot Maggin followed her. He's best known for writing Superman in the 70s. And after Elliot Maggin was Jim Owsley was my next editor. And then I found out that Valiant was looking for artists, and I had a rift with DC at the time over medical, and so I was like, I don't want to get into it, but anyway, it wasn't working out for me there with DC at the time, and so because then I found out Valiant was hiring, and so I went to Valiant, and I was on a list of people, young artists that they wanted to work with because I was cheaper, and so I was doing that for them. I did Turok and Geomancer, like I said, a bunch of other stuff, and then the industry exploded.
Turok is from the video game franchise.
No. Turok was from Dell Comics. As I understand it, it was Jimi Hendrix's favorite comic book in the 1960s.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so, so I did Turok for about 15 issues. And of course, there you see you get Geomancer there. So yeah, it was oh God. I'm trying to Sergio, I think it was an Italian Giamatti, I think it was Gialotti. Sergio Gialotti, I think his name was the artist in the 60s. And so yeah, they Valiant was doing a lot of old gold key characters, so that's how they got Turok and they got Solar and Magnus. They got those licenses, and then from there they branched out and did their own thing with Dr. Mirage and Harbingers and Geomancer and Eternal Warriors, Archer and Armstrong. And so they had the little universe. And then as the industry really, wait, was that? All right, you see the one in the middle?
Yeah.
I did the sound effects. I did the lettering for the sound effects there. Yeah. I was not happy with the way the lettering was being handled, because I felt that they were not making use of the artwork and lettering and marrying them together. Too many letterers were being very timid about the artwork. I guess some artists were more egomaniacal than I was. I'm like, no, make it a part of the artwork. That's what makes it interesting. And so for a little while, and that's one of them, I did the lettering for that.
Cool.
Yeah, it's very cool that, for the details of the pages. I love when artists they start drawing weapons, and the weapons are amazing here. In the last picture,
yeah,
the M16, and the pistol and everything like that.
Yeah, well, we were taught at the Cuba School to research everything, and there was a toy manufacturer, I still have them, that made these little miniature guns, and it was really nice, really well done. So I grabbed it and I started looking at it, turning it around, looking at it from there. So I had good reference. Yeah.
And after you finished with Valiant, how you got back to DC?
Oh, okay. Well, the industry imploded.
Yeah.
And I made friends at Valiant that later on became editors at DC. And probably my best friend in the industry is Tony Bedard, and he was an assistant editor with Dan Raspler. And I was calling everybody. In the time that I had at the time 3 children, and my youngest was my son, who was like 2 years old. So I was having difficulty. Hello, good night. Buenas noches. So I was having difficulty finding work. I called my friends from TSR, and they had some magazines, a magazine called Dungeon and another one called Dragon. I did some work for them. I did a couple of pieces for HarperCollins, the publisher. They were doing novellas. Margaret Weiss's Testament of the Dragon, Isaac Asimov, Ibotics were the books that I did. None of them were very good, but it gave me a couple of things to do. And then there was a vocational school not too far from where I used to live, and so I pitched them a basic drawing, a basic anatomy class, and I showed them my work. I told them what I did, and it was like only $8 an hour for like 2 hours on a Wednesday. That was about it. So I wasn't making a lot of money, and so I would constantly call people, and Tony Bedard, again, my best friend, was working at DC. I said, Tony, you got to find me something, anything, it doesn't matter. I got to find something. And they pitched me something with DC 1 Million by Grant Morrison was out. And they had an Our Man thing that they wanted to do, Our Man with Tom Peyer. And they gave me the story was called it was a short story, part of a compilation, Flash's Infinite Crisis is what it was called. and it had Flash in there and a bunch of the JLA characters, and I went in there and I worked hard and did it, and that eventually got me Our Man, because the only thing that I've done that was part of the main DC continuity before that was the last issue of Black Condor when Batman came in.
Mm-hmm.
So that they took notice of that, and many years later, Dan Raspler says to me, he says, "Have you always been able to do, heroes this well?" And I says, "Well, yes and no. I mean, I'm a better artist now than I was then when I first broke in, but I wasn't as far away as everyone else thought I was. I just wasn't given the opportunity. So that made them very comfortable, and I got Our Man for 20 issues, and then that became Hawkman, and then Identity Crisis, and so forth and so on."
And JSA.
JSA.
JSA, yeah, I did a bunch of stuff for JSA as well. So
What is your favorite character of the JSA?
Captain Marvel.
Oh,
I've always liked his red costume. I liked his cape, the gauntlets. I just thought there are certain costumes that don't need to be ever changed. Spider-Man and Captain Marvel, don't change them. They're perfect the way they are. CC Beck did a wonderful design for the character.
yeah.
And I just, everything they've done since then is just like, nah. I'm stubborn. I like it.
I got a couple of original artwork from JSA and Hawkman.
Oh, look at Hawkman.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Look at Hawkman, man.
You
Now-
worked on the crossover between Hawkman and JSA.
Black Rain. Yeah. Yeah. That run on that was a JSA story on the left there.
Yeah.
Right? I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's
That's a JSA story. Yeah.
JSA.
You could tell there's more intensity in the beginning when I first started it, and then I started, running out of time. Because now I've slowed down to the point where it's you got to make sure that there's only X amount of books in it before I start to really fall off the deep end. But I was still producing enough to make them happy. So at that particular time, I was not very happy with that JSA work. But when I did Black Rain, it was interesting because Black Rain, I was talking to Jeff Johns at the time, and he kept telling me there's something going to happen. They got your name attached to it. It's going to be big. Just don't worry about it. We're going to finish our run on Hawkman, and but it's really going to be a big deal for you. It's going to be great. It's going to be wonderful. You're going to love it. And I says, "Are you sure?" He goes, "Yeah." I says, "All right." So I put my head down and I buried myself into my work, and Black Raid was, that product was just me saying, okay, I got something coming. All right, this is supposed to be life-changing for me. Let's try to finish off, with a bang, just, hit the finish line with my legs kicking and, keep running forward. And then eventually that became Identity Crisis. So yeah,
It's a great. How was working with Brad, because it's a very very strong, very hard story, because and also your work on there. I really love it. I have here my copy, Identity Crisis. I really love it.
Thank you.
And also it was I think that it was a big opportunity for you, because you're part of a crisis, and in DC Comics, crisis is a very important event, right?
Yeah, I'm crisis certified. Yeah. Yeah, when I got that job, they wanted me to come into New York City to meet Brad, and Brad was kind of unknown to the industry. He did a short story called Archer's Quest for Green Arrow.
Yeah.
That was well received. I had not read it at the time. I had not read it, but I get to DC, and they start. All right, this is going to be a weird reference, but do you ever see the opening sequence to the original Get Smart TV show?
Yeah.
When you're walking through the halls and there's these
Yes.
doors open up and they come down
Yes.
from the top and the sides,
Yes.
and he's like dodging all these doors. That's what it was like. Because I was never in this part of DC before. I didn't even know it existed. Because they're taking me deep into the bowels of DC Comics.
Yeah.
And apparently, that's where they have like their really big meetings when they talk to actors and directors and and big muckety mucks. I don't even think it was the normal meeting room for them. But I went in there, and it was this gorgeous glass wall, and through the glass wall, I could see this very long table with a gentleman sitting at the end of it, not knowing it was Brad, but assuming it was. And they open up, and I walk in, and he gets up, and he walks towards me, and he gives me a big hug. And I was a little like, what? It's kind of weird. And he looks at me and says, I'm Jewish. That's what we do. I says, well, I'm a Latino. That's what we do. So it's okay. So we hit it off well immediately. And we spent the next couple of hours just talking about the project, talking about the characters, what they're going to try to do, what they need from me. And so I'm just sitting there, I'm taking notes and doing little sketches, and we're throwing ideas around. And, they're showing me all the old, crazy, weird characters like the Calculator. Calculator was just this guy, I think it was in purple. He had this big calculator on his chest.
Yeah.
These buttons, he would just like press these buttons. Really stupid. And he says, we're going to do something completely different. He's going to be, a guy, just in regular slacks, and he's going to be like the Oracle. It's going to be like the Oracle for the bad guys. I said, oh, that's kind of cool. So I'd have to draw this big thing. That's good. And so that was one of the characters we talked a lot about, and then they handed me the first script, and was it the first? Because they gave it to me piecemeal. And during the meeting, Brad said there's going to be a sequence coming up where the Atom was going to try to break through rope. He's going to shrink into some rope, and then he's going to try to expand and break the rope. I said, okay. He says, yeah, and I'm going to want like 22 panels. I need you to draw every panel. Now, normally when you have 22 panels of the same scene, you might draw a little of it, and then you match it up to a background, and then people in the production, they do the background over and over again. You just kind of match it up on top of that. And I'm thinking, 22 panels of rope of a guy. Whatever, dude. I'm going to go to production with that. And it stuck with me. And I was like, and I've worked hard before, but a double page spread of 22, that's the most boring thing in the world, And I hadn't read the script. And I'm complaining to myself the entire time. And I got the first 2 issues. And so I'm laying in bed, and my then wife was sitting there listening to me complain about 22 pages. Damn 22 pages. I don't know who the hell this guy thinks he is. Is Brad Meltzer, whatever, man. Yeah, he what? So what? He did Archer's Quest, but he's not Kevin Smith. The hell with him, man. I ain't doing no damn 22 panels. Not doing it. And I'm reading. I'm like, this is pretty good. Then I got to the rape scene.
Oof.
And I'm reading this, And I'm realizing that I'm getting mad. I'm really getting angry. And I'm starting to clutch the script a little bit. And I'm starting to get a little sweaty. And I got done with that scene and I put it down. I like, if he wants 22 pages, I'll give him 22 pages. Or 22 panels. I'll give him 22 panels. He wants rope, I can do plenty of rope. I do great rope. You'll see this. I was sold. Because it wasn't so much that the story was so good, it was the way he told it. That he grabbed you by the boo boo. He really grabbed you right by the boo boo, and he really knows how to tell that story. So by the time I got done with that rape scene, I was just like, yeah, 22 panels, no problem. I'll give him 22 panels. I was very happy to. And he thought I was going to do what I said I was going to do too, and he was very surprised.
It was hard for you creating that scene. For you, because it was very tough for us, because it's a character that we love, because all DC characters we have a little we have heart with all the characters. Sue Divney, a very sweet girl, and also
also Mario,
married.
we are speaking about DC. That's something that you never see that coming. It's something that
of course
you never think that could be on a DC comic book. And it was
was shocking.
When you speak about Brad writing, it compares to what you did with your art, because the writing it's good, but the art it's the perfect match. It's the perfect match. It captures every moment in a perfect way. It captures the emotions. It captures the sadness of the characters. It's amazing. I have a few panels here. It's for the absolute edition.
Mhm.
I have a few panels. This one when they do
see?
brainwashing.
He was not going to keep me away from using production. Yeah.
Indeed.
And also, Rex, we always talk about we talk about this story. When we talk about this story, we loved when Deathstroke eliminate all of them. So it's really a strong fight with all the characters. It was, Kyle, we talk about this, and also with Damian.
You guys brought Deathstroke to
the highest level.
Yeah, they returned it to the top tier billions of the DC universe, because it was after Wolfman's, Perez, Titans, and Groomed, and also all other artists. It was like Deathstroke was another character that appears randomly in the books,
like a henchman.
Yeah, but he wasn't such a threat. Here in the book, it's depicted by Rex and Brad with such a badass look and a relentless passion for what he's doing there. He's protecting Dr. Light, and he's fighting all the Justice League and looking all the weaknesses of them. And the panels that you work on, the weaknesses, it's amazing how good and how emotional they are, because you can feel like how Deathstroke is thinking,
and all the rage he has.
And you can feel what he's doing with every one of the with the leaders, especially with Kai. One of the panels I love is when he breaks Kyle Fingers.
Mm.
Like, it's
Yeah.
incredible. It's incredible.
When we handle this this particular story, in order to understand, as you were saying, how elevated a story was for what DC used to be, let's not forget that DC was the OG, the original gangster, the very first superheroes, and they were born in 1938. It was a very different time back then, and so they had to deal with not only handling a childish storytelling, they also had to deal with eventually in the 50s McCarthyism. So prior to McCarthyism, DC had success in between the double feature of a movie. They used to have two movies, and in between the double feature, they have news, a cartoon, or a serial. And they'd have like Batman serial or Superman serials, and so they were branching out already beyond comic books. And Superman was wildly successful. It took Batman a little time to get really good, and it was all because of the Comics Code Authority. These people who were trying to keep youthful innocence in our storytelling. Frederick Wertham wrote a book called "A Seduction of the Innocents," where they tried to prove that DC was grooming children. Batman and Robin were a code for a homosexual relationship, for instance, which is why they had to make Batgirl so that Batgirl and Robin could get together, and Batwoman could get together with Batman, so they could show that they were heterosexual.
Wonder Woman with Steve Trevor and
yeah,
exactly. I mean, I can't to my life. If there's anyone's a gay hero, it should be Wonder Woman. An island full of women. You don't know men. You have no relationships. You have no attraction. You have no. I could see a fascination. If an alien came down from another planet, I'd be fascinated too. But that doesn't mean I'm sexually attracted. But of course, you would have to have. So yeah, I would not be surprised at all that he may have been invented specifically for that. Maybe, I don't know. So between the mythology, and DC's heroes are mythology, they're not born out of science. That came later. But mythology of an alien from another planet, the mythology, which, by the way, an alien from another planet is the same metaphor for Moses going down the river.
Yeah.
Okay, jettison your son into a rocket ship is the same story as Moses going down to the river to save his life. Same basic thing. So you had a biblical mythology as part of the backdrop of Superman, and you had mythology of Wonder Woman from a Greco world of Amazons. So it's all kind of based on mythology and very little science. I mean, sure, you had Jay Garrick, running around, but Hawkman was born out of mythology, with the blade of Anubis, that he got, and he had this dream, and he came out of it, and he realized he's a reincarnated hero from ancient Egypt. Captain Marvel, also mythology. So you had all these otherworldly things going on with these characters, and then came McCarthyism, and so you had to protect not only the license, because they were doing movies now and TV shows and everything, and you also had to adhere to the Comics Code. Okay, I'm getting to the point of the story. Hang in there. So here we have
no, of course.
These comic books are basically handcuffed. They couldn't do more with them. So DC has always been Dad's comic books. Then came Marvel, and they followed the atomic age. Now DC went ahead and did a new Green Lantern, okay, a new Flash. Hawkman was now from another planet. So they went more with the atomic age, because comic books have always been about what's going on at the time. 30s, 40s, World War II. 50s, you had the atomic age, right? Going to the moon, Adam Strange. Then you had the 60s and the 70s. You talk about civil rights. We even did disco, for crying out loud. We had friggin' Dazzler as a comic book. We even did disco because it was popular. So whatever was happening at the time, comic books have always followed. So when Marvel came out and they started having these heroes now that were all science related, Fantastic Four science, Spider-Man science, the Hulk science, Captain America science, okay? Namor was really the only one that was more mythology, okay? Yeah. So they're more grounded in what we call reality, and then you had storylines where they're real people with real problems, and that made them more popular. So by the time the 70s rolled around, and DC could no longer rely on mythology, and Marvel Comics were just basically kicking their ass and doing these great stories, that's when they got Marv Wolfman and George Perez to come over. They even had Kirby come over and do, the New Gods and things like that.
The New Gods.
Right. But again, he's going back to, because he always wanted to do mythology. So where else are you going to do it but at DC, right? So he's bringing back mythology. So so they went ahead and they decided that they were going to change things up, and they got a bunch of heavy hitters from Marvel. And that's how the 80s kind of slowly started making DC a bit more relevant. And they started making stories more interesting, And Batman had finally gotten away from being a campy character that was trying to adhere to the Comics Code Authority, because he couldn't be a dark hero. He started off dark. He was killing people originally.
He wore a gun.
It was all Pulp Fiction, and so they had to get rid of that, and he became really stupid for the longest time, fighting aliens and all this other nonsense. But then they started in the 70s, started making a bit more of a detective. They brought the detective aspect of it, which was safer, because the Comic Code Authority was still there. And so by the time Marv Wolfman and Perez and all these other people from Marvel started coming over, it was eventually amping itself up and getting ready for what would become eventually Identity Crisis. Because by the time Identity Crisis came out, all those storylines of silly campiness were gone. I mean, we had Green Arrow, Green Lantern was dealing with civil rights and the black experience and prejudice and that kind of thing. So they were doing much more interesting things. And the audience was still reading the comics. So the ones that were kids in the 40s and the 50s were now adults in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and they were still reading them. So they had to read stuff that was more in tune with what they liked. So all these things started coming to us. So by the time we got to Identity Crisis, Superman had already gone through things. Batman was already a badass. Wonder Woman had gone through some things. We just took the next logical step and said, okay, if comic books, as it was with Marvel, if comic books were all about real people with real problems, Identity Crisis was right there. And I want to give Peter Tomasi a shout out, because Peter Tomasi, who was my editor at Hawkman, he pushed for me to get Identity Crisis. They were going to go with somebody else. And in fact, they were going to give Identity Crisis to Ethan Van Sciver. And then I was going to go do Rebirth. But because I was faster than Ethan, and they needed that out first, they gave me Identity Crisis, which is perfect. And because Peter and I worked on Hawkman, he knew I was really good at subtlety, at being able to do emotion, do the little things that more about characterization. I always bring out my favorite scene in Hawkman during Black Rain where they're all having a dinner party, and then Hawkman comes in, he's all beat up, and he walks in, and you see this one panel where all the heroes are looking at the audience, breaking the fourth wall, but they're basically looking at Hawkman.
Yeah.
And Kendra is like this. Oh my God, what? And everybody is looking at Hawkman except for Courtney. Stargirl is looking at her best friend. She was reading her reaction. See, that was my touch. That's the little thing that I added to it, because to me, if they're girlfriends, they're very close. And if this one's affected by what's happening, she wants to be with her girlfriend. So it's when I did little subtle things like that, that's what got Peter Tomasi to really push for me to do Identity Crisis, because they knew it was going to rely heavily on body language, rely heavily on expression, rely heavily on mood, and I was really good at that, and proudly, I think that's probably my strength, is to be able to do that kind of thing.
You're pretty good at showing emotion, and the expressions are amazing.
Every expression on the story.
There's a moment when at the funeral of Sue, when Elastic Man is devastated. He's devastated. He's crying. He can't contain himself. That scene breaks my heart. It's
and
something.
Also, I think the other of course, but the other one is the ending. The ending is also very sad.
Yeah,
very sad, and it's really you capture you capture very well the essence and the and the how do I say his moment to start from remembering and having his heart. So it's amazing, and also it's amazing. I have to say, the plot twist of the story, because it's one of the greatest plot twists on.
Well, I got a question about it, because there was a long time that it was said that they actually, like they did in Armageddon 2001, the actual killer was the Atom.
Mm.
Did you got to draw that page with the Atom as a killer? Was he the killer?
No, it was always Gene.
Okay.
It never changed. If you remember, I was telling you before, I would get these issues one or two at a time.
Yeah.
So when I had to get to the scene where they're doing a flashback of what happened to Sue, there was one scene where I had to have someone in silhouette holding a flamethrower, and I didn't know who the killer was at the time. He wouldn't tell me, no one, because they didn't want it to get out. And so that kind of got in the way of me doing my job. So I begged, I had to bother him. I says, look, Brad, I'm drawing this character in silhouette, and I have no idea how to do it, because I don't know how tall they are, if they're big, who it is important, you know. He goes, well, they're going to be wearing a trench coat. I says, sure. But a man wearing a trench coat is very different from a woman wearing a trench coat. You know, I don't know who it is. So he says, all right, but you got to promise not to tell anybody. I says, yes, let me know so I can do my job. He says, it's Gene Loring. I said, oh, okay. See, now, because I'm a professional, I'm not thinking like a nerd and running out to the comic shop and saying, it's Gene Loring, everybody. I didn't do that. My first thought was like, okay, Gene Loring, okay, her hair is like this. Okay, if they put the trench coat. So I'm thinking already of how I'm going to draw the scene, because that's all I cared about. I just want to get the damn thing done. And so, yeah, it was always Gene. It was never, I mean, anything where they talked about that, that's just good fodder. You know, that's just let them talk, because it's more interesting when they talk about it than what's really going on. So.
And when you finish all the book, what did it mean to you?
Wow, between Black Condor, or not Black Condor, Black Rain, and Identity Crisis, in 1 year, I did about 263 pages, and I had to do a whole lot of promotional stuff, some stuff that got my editor angry, because he was out of the office when they, like with these Wizard magazine, wanted me to do something for them to help promote it, and they got me to do it, and they went over his head, and he didn't like that. But what did it mean to me?
Yeah, the final, when you saw the final product.
I didn't see the final product until it was the final product. And every artist that I know, certainly I'm this way, I don't look at the entire thing. I'm going back, I'm thinking I could have done this better. Oh, I could have done that better. That came out better than I thought it would. The colorist really screwed me here, but no, they saved me here. The inking is really good. I'm breaking it apart differently, There's one story I heard about Prince, the artist Prince, the musician. And he was sitting at home, and they were watching another musician on TV. And he's sitting there, and he's like this. And the person who's telling the story looks at him and says to him, he says, "You're rearranging it, aren't you?" And he goes, "Yeah." He's not even listening to the song. He's looking at how they handle the bits and pieces of it. He's looking at the ingredients. He's not looking at the final, production. And that's the way I was. So when I got it done, I was just like, oh, it's finally over. Thank God. And I did it. No one filled in for me. No one had to, yelled at me. I got it the way they wanted it. Everybody's happy. Thank God. All right. It's like I was a kid, and I came back with my Halloween candy, and now I'm just going to sit down, and I'm going to be, okay, let's open the bag. That's the way it was for me. This was supposed to be a big deal. It's a great story. I knew it was good. I knew it was going to be well received, but how well received, I didn't know. That was, that was yet to be. So I just sat there. I said, okay, now give me my money. Of course, like that.
Rags, and the reaction from fans when you have to go to the conventions, and they gave you the work, the Identity Crisis. What did they say to you? What did they say to you?
Oh, it was a lot of, hey, good jobs, great story, and I was raised differently, and my very first thought was like, yeah, okay, for now. That means I have to keep doing this, I never wanted to be a one-hit wonder, and unfortunately, and sometimes fortunately, Identity Crisis is always first and foremost. Lately now it's been Superman 52, the Action Comics run that I did. Hawkman. It's always nice to hear people like my Hawkman. Hourman, even occasionally, people are still telling me, how come they haven't done a trade of this? It's brilliant. I says, I know. Tom Pyre wrote a wonderful story, and it really deserves to be looked at again, because it didn't get the attention that we thought it deserved. We were wondering, where was our audience? Starman had a big audience, where was ours? But we were a little more quirky, and he was writing more toward a segment of society that was overlooked, so he had that support that we didn't. So I've managed to get a lot of things. Turok is another one people come back to me for sometimes. Nightwing, one occasion.
There you work with Peter.
Yeah. That's it's funny because people said, "Oh yeah, sure, you're just extending the story, so you put out a trade," because everybody's cynical. And that wasn't the reason. The real reason is because Grant Morrison was hard to track down, and we couldn't finish what we were doing until we knew what he was doing, because it was all related. And so because he's a very busy man, so a lot of times we were just kind of waiting to hear. And so, well, how about if we do this? Okay. And that's what extended the line of the storyline. It wasn't the intent to go there. It just happened to go there. And there you see the character in the middle, the old man in the middle. Cretan Kendall was the man responsible for Black Condor. And I told Peter, I says, listen, when I was doing Black Condor, there was something called the Golden Wing Society, ran by the grandfather of Black Condor, of Ryan Kendall, and his name was Cretan Kendall. And he had this thing about, he wanted to create an army of people coming down from the clouds, flying down from the clouds. There's an old Greek mythology of coming down from the clouds and dispensing justice, at least his version of justice. And so I told Peter that, and he liked the idea, and that's what inspired the direction we went with this, this kind of like Deathlock-looking guy, I guess. I was just trying to come up with something interesting.
It's a cool story arc, especially because I think you got till the end of the story of the run.
Yeah.
You stay till the end of the run.
Well, yeah, but they were. I was falling behind, and we were on our way to catching up when they lifted me from that, and they never told me why. We were making up for lost time, and we were doing well, but I guess they decided to go in another direction, and that was it.
And you mentioned Mr. Grant Morrison.
Yeah.
How was
working with
Grant Morrison in Action Comics, since it was difficult to find, it was difficult to contact?
Yeah. Grant Morrison is a very, very busy bee. And he's a sweetheart. He is one of the nicest people. He's such a... sometimes I don't know if he does that because people want that of him and they expect it of him, or if that's the way he generally is. I think he's genuine. But you ever see the movie A Beautiful Mind?
Yeah.
With Cameron Crowe?
Yeah.
Where he's this brilliant physicist, but he loses his mind because he thinks he's got an implant in his arm. He's ripping his skin. Where there's this one scene where he goes completely off the deep end, and he's in a shed, and there's a light swinging, and he's got all these things on a wall. He's got all this string going from here to here. That's what it's like working with Grant Morrison. You don't know. See, because when you're working, give me a moment. I'm realizing my battery's running low. Let me get my plug.
Okay.
Be right back.
Okay.
Sorry. But I'll finish the story.
No problem.
Bueno, mientras tanto, yo me tuve que cambiar porque me tuve que venir acá porque tuve unos problemas ahí en donde siempre streameo. Así que imagínate. La estamos pasando fenómeno, Kai, ¿no?
Gente, historias, las anécdotas que te ha contado Raúl Morales, es un placer tenerlo. Es muy lindo que seamos testigos de estas historias y que ustedes estén ahí apoyando el canal, dejando su like y disfrutando de esto. Que acuérdense que después del vivo, a los 2 días más o menos, se suben los subtítulos que son traducidos automáticamente por YouTube, ¿no? Así que aprovechen, dejen su like, si quieren colaborar, colaboren. Ahí tienen el cafecito o super chat, lo que sea.
Sí. Bueno, ahora Sergio nos va a contar sobre su trabajo con Grant Morrison en New 52. Y bueno,
okay,
vamos a hablar de
hang on. I can hear you. Okay.
All right, welcome back, Rex.
Thank you very much. I didn't want to lose you.
Here we are talking with the chat with the people, and they wanted to know how was working with Grant in New 52, because New 52
They
is
say great Morris.
Great Morris. It's a guy that he loved the comic books, and especially all the Silver Age and everything like that, right?
Okay, so that's working with Grant. It's like a beautiful mind. And he would write at the beginning of every script a nice little paragraph, just a little communication, because he's hard to get in contact with. So the only contact I had with him was through this little thing he wrote to me. Oh, you're doing beautiful work. It's looking great. I'm very energized. It's terrific. You're gonna like what we're doing here. Blah 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 blah. He's like really with the pom poms, right? And so, if you're ever doing a comic book professionally, you get a script, and there's a lot of information there, and it's superfluous. It's too much of it, right? And so, instinctually what the important things are. And normally you take things out, if you give like 50% of what the writer wants, that's all he's really looking for anyway. But with Grant, you don't know what's going to come back. Okay? So you have to do everything. And so, because that little dog peeing on a fire hydrant could be the villain. So if he mentions a dog peeing on a fire hydrant, you put the dog peeing on a fire hydrant, because it's Grant Morrison. It's gonna come back.
Like Homer Simpson when he said, "Look that face of that dog."
Yeah,
with the eyes.
Exactly. So that's and because he is hard to get in contact with. There'd be times when I had a question, and the only person I could talk to was his wife, because she was the main communication. And I'd write her an email, and then I'd wait a day or two or three to finally I had to call my editor and say, listen, I don't know what to do here. I mean, I have a question. So we figure it out together, and then we'd move on from there. So they're very, very busy people, and he's brilliant, and with enough time, I would love to work with him again.
Rex, when you got the assignment of Superman, I imagine that you think that you were drawing the Superman we
all know,
everyone love, with the blue suit.
Yeah.
And how was it realizing he wears a t-shirt and jeans?
Well, it made perfect sense. Superheroes didn't exist when we handled it. New 52 was all about starting all over again. So if he's the first superhero, there's no template. There's no one to follow. There's no uniform. When Batman saw Zorro, he knew where he was going with his ideas, because he saw Zorro as a child. There's no such thing for Superman. And when they first said to me, we don't know what this is going to look like. Matt Idelson was my editor. And he says, listen, we're having a hard time understanding where you're going to go. Can you do a drawing? We'll pay you for it, but can you do a drawing for us so you could see, what it would look like? I said, sure, no problem. Now, there are certain archetypes in comic books that are reliable, and we kind of feed off of each other. They're linchpins, And for me, jeans and a t-shirt was easy. I thought right off the bat, Little Abner from Al Cap from the 1950s was a comic strip of hillbillies, and Little Abner had these big like farmer's boots. He He had broad shoulders, narrow waist. And he had the overalls, and he had this frou-frou hairdo. So I says, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want to do. It's super easy, It's little Abner, really. So I took little Abner, and I added him with Elvis from but early Elvis from the 1950s. When he was cute and fresh and new, not the weird one that he became, the good Elvis. So I took a little bit of early Elvis, a little bit of Lil Abner, and then the last element, because I understood that we were going to start Superman all over again, and thankfully, because I didn't like Superman, I thought he became ridiculous. I thought they jumped the shark when he got married. I thought he got too powerful. Because what happens is when you're Superman, you're this powerful, and all the villains are down here. Well, in order to outdo Superman, you got to do this. And then Superman says, okay. And it doesn't become long before he's pushing planets back into orbit, right? So it got to the point after 78 years, it became really ridiculous. So because we were going back to making him from the very beginning, I took Lil Abner, Elvis, and Max Fleischer, Superman. I put those three together, and that's how I came with it. And that drawing that I did of him in jeans for the first time became a cover, and that's when he's holding up the rock and he's all in shadow. You see the t-shirt and the jeans.
Oh, it's amazing.
I love it.
That's why he looks older, because I didn't know he's going to be 23 at the time. I didn't know I had to make him younger. That's why he looks older in that drawing, because that was just for them to see what he would look like. And then they went on and they used it. They liked it and they used it.
I love the short cape.
Yeah.
I love the short cape.
Yeah, that was Superman that I remembered him from the 70s. He had that. He didn't have that long cape like Batman. He had a shorter cape.
Yeah.
You know, Rex, that from now on, when I read that run, I'm gonna watch Superman's face and I'm gonna see Elvis.
Max Fleischer. And Max Fleischer.
when he's running from the cops and they shoot at him, and he catches the bullet in his hand, okay.
Yeah.
Look at his face.
I think I got it here.
Okay.
Let me
Go
see.
ahead. If you can get it.
Oh, look at that.
That one.
Hey, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That's Elvis. Thank you very much. Yeah. That's what was in my head.
Superman has left the building.
That's it. Yeah, Kal-El.
It's amazing. It's amazing that cover racks with when the police is chasing him. It's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, that's that was a variation of my first draft. They collected it and they showed the original first sketch because Grant said it's called Action Comics, so let's make everything action, everything fast paced, and leave them wanting more. So when I first did the first drawing, it was him just like flying fast past buildings, action, right? But they didn't like the angle, and they came up with that one. That one worked out. And if you look at the pose, that's not him flying.
No, he's jumping. He's jumping.
He's leaping from building to building in a single bound, right? Because that's what he.
Yeah.
Because for the first 10 years, he didn't fly. In the first 10 years, that was the pose that he always had. So I just brought it back, and then I put 1938 on the tops of the cars there. So a little homage to the year when he first came out in 1938. And that was it. So it was cool.
It has something about John Burns too, right?
I guess.
I think because when I watch when I see the cover and everything like that, it's a Superman when John Byrne started to run in his early days before he was Superman. So it has something familiar too.
Well,
it was not on purpose, of course, because it's your vision, but because I love the character. So
thank you very much.
It's amazing.
Thank you very much.
Really, Rex is amazing.
Yeah.
This take on Superman, I really love it because as you said, it's a beginning that like it was from actually the 1938. It's
Yes.
from the very beginning with an experienced and a reckless Superman, and I know a lot of people doesn't like that take on, but I really love it. It's one of my favorite stories of Superman, and uh, uh, maybe self-contained stories you run with Grant Morrison, and it's amazing. It's the gestures, the scenes, the emotions, also the backups. I think it was done by Cooley Hammer, maybe the backups. I think,
The ones from the first issue.
yeah.
Uh, I wasn't following anybody. No, no. I mean, I love Cully too. He's a really good artist, but no, if it's possible that out of continuity he might have been following me, but no, I those characters, I just there's a sportscaster um, in New York called Joe Beningo. He's retired now, but the head cop there, I kind of modeled him after Joe Beningo. Yeah.
No,
Those
it's
are the
amazing.
cool stuff we love. Those Easter eggs. You're going.
You put a lot of Easter eggs.
Yeah. Quite a few. Yeah, and on the cover, that woman underneath the A, the woman pointing.
Yeah.
At the time, I was with somebody. That was her mother. That was her mother. I drew. So yeah, I'm always putting somebody in there.
Also, I really loved this scene in the cover of number 3 that he's surrounded by people. It's very like a homage to John Barnes. A scene when he's surrounded by people and he got afraid and flew away.
And Lois Lane was protecting him like he was protecting.
Yeah. Again, I wasn't really referring to anybody at the time, but comic books doesn't take long before we kind of overlap each other anyway. So
sure, of course.
And ending the interview because we don't want to steal you more time, Mr. Morales. Tell us what you're working right now. What's your actual project right now?
I'm doing something called Order and Outrage. It's with Jim Starlin, and he and Dark Horse is the publisher. It's a science fiction, because it's Jim Starlin, science fiction. And they put out the second cover already.
Yeah.
How about that? Right on. All right, so yeah, it's you know what? It would be better because I told Jim, I says, they're going to start asking me about this, and I don't know how much I could talk about. So I says, Jim, write me up a synopsis of something that I could tell people. And let me see if I can find it here.
Okay.
Give me a moment.
No, of course.
No problem.
Jim Starlin was another genius.
Okay. Order and Outrage is about thousands of years of frustration and oppression of a female cosmic being by her male counterpart. It's a story of discovery and struggle. That's what he wanted me to say.
Okay.
But it's also very political.
Yeah.
And if anybody knows me, I've been following politics since I was 14 years old.
Oh.
Because when I was 14, it was when Ronald Reagan got into office. And when I was a teenager and Jimmy Carter was in office, we had blackouts, we had brownouts. Son of Sam, the serial killer, was on the loose. We had OPEC and oil embargoes. We had all kinds of things happening. I remember watching the news, and there was a big thing about oil tankers being just beyond American territory, okay? And we're having an oil crisis. And I couldn't understand why. Why couldn't the president just say, hey, bring it in? We need, we need gas. It took me years later to figure it out. But I've always been kind of aware of what's going on around me, because all of a sudden everything was terrible under Jimmy Carter. And then Ronald Reagan came out, and it's lifestyles of the rich and famous, and things are wonderful again, and spend, and government isn't a solution. Government is the problem. Blah blah.
War on drugs.
It became a complete 180, and I was trying to figure out. I know even at 14, I knew that doesn't happen overnight. How does it happen overnight? How is it that a new president comes in, and on his inauguration speech, he announces that the hostages from Iran are back home? How does that happen? I was cynical. And so I've been paying attention ever since. And now I know all of what happened. The reason why the oil tankers were outside is because the president had no jurisdiction outside of the territory. And they were trying to make the Democrat look bad, because they wanted to have a Republican. Because if anybody knows about Republicans, is that they make their money on oil. Big oil is their big funder. Democrats, it's mostly about the banks. But for the Republicans, and they wanted Reagan to look good, they kept the oil out, kept the problems coming until it was time for the election. And then, of course, when he came in, then they bring it in.
Yeah, of course.
See? And
so something like that here in Argentina.
Yeah. Sounds familiar
like
here.
It's familiar here in Argentina, all the presidents.
Yeah. Well,
since 1810.
There's a worldwide problem now happening,
Rex, you have material here because we here south of the border. We have queues. We have another things that in the 80s that all the writers and the artists, they describe the real thing here would happen here.
Yeah.
We know all this stuff, all the political stuff.
We got we had Trump. We had Putin. We have President Xi, dictator Xi. We had Erdogan, Bolsonaro. We have what's that guy? I can't think of his name.
What country? Which country?
Okay, Erdogan that's Turkey, right? I'm thinking of the Hungarian. Oh, what the hell is his name? Anyway, we have all these dictators popping up. Okay, back in the 40s, you only had 3 of them. You had to worry about Japan, you had to worry about Italy, and you had to worry about Germany, right? Then Stalin came in and became a big problem. But those were the 3. Now it's like, okay, the technology is there now that we can all start rising up together if we want to be oligarchs. And it's happening also in the Philippines as well. You have all these dictators popping up, and so it's as if they say every 80 years history starts to go through the process of dictatorships again. Okay, because it's all generational. The first after you have the first generation being, like, say, the Great Depression. The next generation are the go-getters. Okay, they grow up and we're going to fix things, so they begin to fix things, right? The next generation after that are the ones that get spoiled. Then the generation after that are the ones that are despondent and they become drug addicts, and nothing's ever really changed. It's still the same problems, and then it falls apart, and the process starts all over again. And they say that whoever is alive, whoever dies of the last great war, when that last person dies is when the problems start all over again, which is basically 80 years. So that's why these things repeat every 80 years. And in America, if you go back to, every 80 years we have for like now to World War II. Then from World War II to Civil War to the Revolutionary War. Every 80 years is a big thing. And it takes 80 years for that to cycle through so they can start it all over again. It's almost like it's a dirty secret that rich people give to their children. That, I won't be around, but you're going to have to carry the shit stick when I leave. It's like that.
Yes.
So it's we're going through it again. But luckily we have more resources available to us, and information is coming to us in real time. Back then it was easier, for Hitler to rise. But now we see it all happening, and we have a historic sense, and we have books, and we have people talking about it, and it's going to be harder for them now. But and I'm hopeful because of that. But it's not going to be easy.
What an amazing chat we had with
we have a great
Mr.
conversation here.
Mr. Rag Morales. I want to thank you a lot, Rags, because we had a great time speaking with you. We had the chance to hear a lot of stories we didn't know, a lot of anecdotes that really are really interesting for us, because that's what we love to hear, the behind the scenes and the stories, the inspiring stories that you told us, how you got into comics, how hard it was for you, and how fighting for it you got to where you are now. That it doesn't have a price. Priceless.
Thank you.
Priceless.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your time and consideration for coming here to this show that's called Protagonistas del Cómic.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And before I go, my partner, along with Jim Starlin on Order and Outrage, someone I'm very, very, very excited about. My colorist is a former student of mine. Her name is Haley Brown, and she is magnificent. She is a smart artist. She is a hard worker, a really hard worker, and she's going to be a name to pay attention to. I have a feeling about this one. She's going to be a very, very, very good one. So,
Rex, and I have to say to you, as I said to every artist and every writer who came to here to Protagonistas del Comic, sorry for our English.
Your English, trust me, it's much better than my Spanish.
And also, and there's the thing I have to say, that thanks to you, because you are the real hero, because with your drawing, with your scripts, with everything you put, with all the heart you put, you are the real heroes. So you are the real heroes because you show us, and we can feel all your job, and that's all we love. So we love your work because you put a lot of heart in it. So thank you so much. You are the real hero, Rex.
That's very nice. I don't believe you.
No, really. It's from the bottom of my heart. It's saying everything.
Or as Groucho used to say, from the heart of my bottom. It's funny because I'm not going to say who the artist is, and I'll leave you with this. But I'm at a convention, and I'm having dinner, and I'm telling this artist how wonderful he is, and how inspirational he was to me, and I'm being very, as you have just been, very effusive in my admiration. And he looks at me and goes, I just farted. So I'll leave that there. I appreciate it, but I just farted.
Well, Rex,
We love you. We love you for that too. So our pleasure.
We're gonna say goodbye in Spanish before. Gente, nada, acá el señor Rack Morales.
Genial.
Genial, la verdad que nos reímos mucho. Un lujazo tenerlo acá. Apoyen el nuevo trabajo que se llama Order and Outrage. Va a estar con Jim Starling. Apóyenlo, cómprenlo, léanlo, porque promete muchísimo. Así que nos estamos viendo en la próxima. Muchísimas gracias. Thanks a lot, Rax.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Mario. Gracias, Mario.
Por favor.
Te saludaba en inglés, Mario.
Por favor.
Y nos estamos viendo. Adiós, gente.
Adiós.
Gracias.
Goodbye. Bye bye.